In the distant future, where humanity has colonized the stars, a mysterious signal from the far reaches of the galaxy piques the curiosity of the crew of the Starship Horizon. What secrets does the abandoned planet known as Erythra hold? Why does the signal seem to be directed specifically at them? And most importantly, what or who awaits them in the shadows of deep space? Prepare for a journey filled with intrigue, danger, and discovery that will challenge everything you thought you knew about the universe. This is a science fiction story that will take you beyond the limits of your imagination. The silence of space was deceptive. Though there was no sound in the vacuum, the sense of stillness was only an illusion. Inside the Starship Horizon, the constant hum of warp engines echoed through every corner of the metal hull. The crew of 7 had been traveling for weeks toward the planet Erythra, an abandoned world at the edge of the galaxy. Their mission was simple: investigate a mysterious signal that seemed to be directed specifically at them. Captain Elias Kane, a middle-aged man with a piercing gaze and a scar running across his cheek, sat in the cockpit. His hands glided over the holographic controls, adjusting the ship's trajectory. Beside him, pilot Lyra Solari, a young but experienced woman, watched the screens intently. "How much longer?" Lyra asked, breaking the silence. "About 4 hours," Elias replied, without taking his eyes off the data flowing before his eyes. "But something doesn't add up." "What do you mean?" "The signal we're following? It's not natural. Someone or something is sending it, and it appears to be alive." Lyra frowned. "Do you think it could be dangerous?" "I don't know," Elias admitted. "But we can't afford to underestimate the unknown." Meanwhile, in the ship's laboratory, the lead scientist, Dr. Mira Voss, was analyzing the latest signal readings. Her assistant, an android named Axiom 7, was assisting her with precise calculations. "Axiom, have you noticed anything unusual in these readings?" Mira asked, adjusting her glasses. "Yes, doctor," the android replied in a monotone. "The signal contains patterns that do not match any records in the database. It appears to be encrypted." Mira smiled, excited by the prospect of a revolutionary discovery. This could change everything we know about interstellar communication. Elsewhere on the ship, Chief Engineer Torin Malek was working on engine maintenance. He was a burly man with calloused hands and a brilliant mind. Beside him, Communications Officer Zara Quinn was trying to decipher the signal. "Any clues?" Torin asked, wiping his hands on a rag. "Nothing," Zara replied, frustrated. "It's like the signal is playing with us." "Do you think it could be a trap?" "I don't know, but I don't like it." The last member of the crew, security expert Cale Draven, was in the weapons room, checking equipment. He was a taciturn man, but his presence inspired confidence. He knew that in space, preparation was the key to survival. As the horizon approached the planet Erythra, tensions on board increased. Everyone felt like they were on the brink of something big, something that could change their lives forever. But there was also a sense of unease, as if the universe was warning them that not everything was as it seemed. The planet Erythra appeared on the horizon, a world of reddish and orange hues, shrouded in a mysterious haze. The horizon entered orbit, and the crew gathered in the cockpit to discuss the plan of action. "According to the scanners, the atmosphere is breathable," Elias said, projecting a holographic image of the planet. "But there are areas of high radiation that we must avoid." "And the signal?" Lyra asked. "It's still there, and it's stronger than I thought. We can't ignore it. So what do we do?" Torin asked, crossing his arms. "We'll split up the team," Elias decided. "Lyra, Zara, and I will go to the surface. Torin, Cale, and Mira will stay on the ship to monitor the situation." "And me?" Axiom 7 asked. "You stay with Mira. We need you to analyze any data we receive." The exploration team quickly prepared, equipping themselves with special suits and research tools. As they descended in the shuttle toward the planet's surface, a sense of anticipation filled the air. The landscape that greeted them was surreal. Mountains of red rock rose on the horizon, and rivers of bright liquid snaked across the ground. The sky was a deep orange, and the sun, a distant star, emitted a soft but warm light. This is incredible, Zara murmured, recording everything with her camera. Stay alert, Elias warned. We don't know what's here. As they explored, they found structures that looked like they were made by an advanced civilization. They were buildings made of a material similar to metal, but more durable. In the center of a plaza, there was an obelisk that emitted a pulsating glow. That must be the source of the signal, Lyra said, approaching carefully. Don't touch anything, Elias ordered, but it was too late. As they approached, Lyra activated a hidden mechanism. The obelisk began to emit a deep sound, and the ground beneath their feet trembled. Suddenly, a blinding light enveloped them, and everything went black. When Elias opened his eyes, he found himself in a place he didn't recognize. He wasn't on the planet Erythra, nor on the ship. He was in some sort of circular chamber, with walls that seemed to be made of pure energy. Lyra? Zara? He called, but there was no answer. Suddenly, a voice echoed in his mind. It was not a sound, but a presence, as if someone or something was communicating directly with his thoughts. Welcome, traveler, the voice said. You have reached the threshold. Who are you? Elias asked, trying to remain calm. We are the Guardians. We have been waiting for you. For me? For what? Because you are the key. The fate of the universe is in your hands. Before Elias could respond, a series of images flooded his mind. He saw ancient civilizations, interstellar wars, and a cataclysmic event that threatened to destroy everything that existed. What is this? He asked, confused. It's the future, the voice replied, and it's up to you to change it. Meanwhile, on the ship, Torin and Mira were trying to understand what had happened. The readings showed that the exploration team had disappeared without a trace. Where are they? Mira asked desperately. I don't know, Torin replied, but we're going to find them. Kale, who had been silent, finally spoke up. There's something else. The energy readings are increasing. If we don't do something soon, this ship could be destroyed. Mira looked at Axiom 7. Can you track a signal? I'll try, the android said, connecting to the ship's systems. Meanwhile, in the chamber, Elias began to understand his role. The Guardians explained to him that the planet Erythra was a portal to other dimensions, and that the signal was the result of a cosmic battle that had occurred eons ago. You must choose, the Guardians said. You can close the portal and save your universe, or open it and join us in a new reality. Elias knew that his decision would not only affect his crew, but all of existence. Time seemed to stand still in the chamber. Elias felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. With every passing second, the images of the future became clearer. He saw worlds destroyed, entire civilizations disappearing into an abyss of darkness. But he also saw hope, a ray of light shining through the chaos. How can I close the portal? He asked, determined. You must find the core, the voice replied. It is at the heart of the planet. But be careful. There are forces that do not want you to close it. What forces? The Devourers, beings that feed on dimensional energy. If they find you, you will have no escape. Elias nodded, even though he knew he couldn't see the Guardians. So how do I get to the core? We will guide you, but you must trust us. Suddenly, the camera began to fade, and Elias found himself back on the planet's surface. Lyra and Zara were beside him, disoriented but unharmed. What happened? Lyra asked, rubbing her head. There's no time for explanations, Elias said. We have to get to the heart of the planet. And how do we do that? Zara asked. Follow me. As they moved forward, the landscape began to change. The red rock mountains became darker, and the air was filled with an oppressive energy. Suddenly, they heard a roar in the distance. What was that? Lyra asked, looking around. The Devourers, Elias replied. We can't let ourselves get caught. They ran to a nearby cave, but it was not a safe haven. Inside, the walls seemed to be alive, moving and changing shape. This isn't normal, Zara murmured. Nothing here is, Elias said, but we have no other choice. Meanwhile, back on the ship, Torin and Mira were working against the clock to stabilize the systems. Residual power was affecting the engines, and if they didn't do something soon, the Horizon could be stranded in orbit. Axiom, can you calculate an escape route? Torin asked. I will try, the android replied, but I need more time. We don't have time, Kale said. If we don't leave soon, we won't be able to help Elias and the others. Mira looked at Torin, worried. Do you think they can do it? I don't know, Torin replied. But we have to trust them. The cave led them to an underground tunnel that seemed to stretch into infinity. The walls emitted a faint glow, illuminating the way, but also creating shadows that moved eerily. Elias led the group, with Lyra and Zara following close behind. How much longer? Zara asked, panting. I don't know, Elias replied. But we must move on. Suddenly, the tunnel opened into a gigantic chamber. In the center, there was a structure that looked like an altar with a crystal floating in the air. It was the core. That's it, Elias said, approaching carefully. What now? Lyra asked. I have to close the portal, but I need time. Then we got you covered, Zara said, pulling out her gun. Elias nodded and approached the crystal. As he did so, a surge of energy engulfed him, and he felt an immediate connection to the core. He began to receive images and emotions, as if the crystal was trying to communicate with him. Understand, he murmured. I must balance the energies. While he worked, Lyra and Zara kept watch at the entrance to the chamber. It wasn't long before they heard noises coming from the tunnel. Something's coming, Lyra said, aiming her gun. Be ready, Zara warned. The Devourers appeared, grotesque creatures that seemed to be made of pure shadow and energy. They advanced quickly, their intentions clearly hostile. Shoot, Lyra shouted, opening fire. Zara followed him, but the bullets seemed to have no effect on the creatures. It's not working, Zara shouted desperately. Keep trying, Lyra replied, reloading her gun. Meanwhile, Elias was in a trance, completely focused on his task. He knew that if he failed, not only would they die, but the entire universe would be in danger. I almost have it, he murmured, feeling the energies beginning to balance. But then, one of the Devourers managed to get past and lunged at him. Elias, be careful, Lyra shouted, but it was too late. The creature struck him, severing his connection to the core. Elias fell to the ground, stunned, as the crystal began to glow unsteadily. No, he screamed, trying to get up. At that moment, a voice echoed through the chamber. It was Axiom 7, who had managed to establish a connection through the ship's systems. Captain, I can help you, the android said, but I need you to give me full access to the core. How? Elias asked, confused. Trust me. Elias hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. Do it. Axiom 7 began transmitting a series of codes into the crystal, stabilizing the energies. The Devourers retreated, as if they were being repelled by an invisible force. It works, Zara cried, relieved. But not for long, Axiom 7 warned. You must close the portal now. Elias stood up, determined. With a final effort, he managed to re-establish his connection with the core and complete the process. The crystal glowed with a blinding light, and then everything was still. The Devourers disappeared, and the residual energy dissipated. The portal was closed. We did it, Elias muttered, exhausted. Lyra and Zara helped him up, and together they left the chamber. They knew their mission was over, but they also knew they had changed the course of history. The return to the ship Horizon was a silent journey. The crew was exhausted, but also filled with a sense of accomplishment. They had faced the unknown and emerged victorious. However, something in the air told them that it was not all over. Upon reaching the ship, Torin and Mira greeted them with relief. We thought we had lost them, Mira said, hugging Elias. It wasn't easy, Elias replied. But we did it. And the portal? Torin asked. Closed, Lyra said, and it will never open again. Axiom 7 approached, his usual calm. It was an honor to help, Captain. Thank you, Axiom, Elias said, smiling. We couldn't have done it without you. As the ship prepared for the journey back to Earth, Elias stood in the cockpit, looking out at the planet Erythra for the last time. He knew they had done the right thing, but he also knew that the universe was full of mysteries they did not yet understand. What's happening now? Lyra asked, coming closer. Now, Elias replied, we are going home, but this is not the end. It is only the beginning. The journey back to Earth was uneventful, But the crew couldn't help but feel that something had changed within them. They hadn't just closed an interdimensional portal, they had touched something bigger, something beyond their understanding. Elias spent long hours in the cockpit, reviewing the data they had collected on the planet Erythra. Even though the portal was closed, the residual energy readings were still intriguing. There was something about those numbers, those fluctuations, that didn't add up. "Are you still thinking about that?" Lyra asked, entering with 2 cups of synthetic coffee. "Yes," Elias replied, accepting a cup. "Something doesn't add up. The portal is closed, but the energy hasn't completely dissipated. It's like something else is there. Do you think the Devourers could return? I don't know, but we can't rule anything out." Meanwhile, in the lab, Mira and Axiom 7 worked on the samples they had brought back from the planet. The unknown element they had discovered remained a mystery, but each analysis revealed new layers of complexity. "This is incredible," Mira said, looking at the readings on the screen. "This element is not only stable, but it appears to have properties that defy the laws of physics. Do you think it could be useful?" Axiom 7 asked. "Useful is not the word. This could revolutionize everything we know about energy, matter, even time." Elsewhere on the ship, Torin and Kale were checking the horizon systems. Though the ship had held up well during the journey, they both knew they couldn't let their guard down. "Do you think we're ready for what's next?" Kale asked, adjusting a control panel. "We never are," Torin replied. "But that's what makes this exciting." Zara, meanwhile, was in her cabin, reviewing the recordings she had made on the planet. The images of the metal structures and the obelisk fascinated her, but they also disturbed her. There was something about them, something she couldn't explain. "What are you hiding?" he muttered, moving closer to the screen. Suddenly, the image of the obelisk began to distort, and a blurry figure appeared in the background. Zara leaned forward, trying to make out what it was, but before she could, the screen went black. "What the hell?" he muttered, fiddling with the controls. But the screen remained black. As the horizon approached Earth, tensions on board increased. Everyone felt that something was about to happen, but they didn't know what. "Captain, we have a problem," Torin said, entering the cockpit. "What's wrong?" Elias asked, getting up from his seat. "The energy readings are fluctuating again. It's like something is trying to break through." "The portal?" "I don't know, but it's not normal." Elias frowned. "Prepare for anything. We can't take any chances." Meanwhile, in the lab, Mira and Axiom 7 were still working on the samples. Suddenly, the unknown element began to emit an intense glow, and the readings on the screen became chaotic. "Axiom, do something!" Mira shouted, backing away. "I'm trying," the android replied, but its systems seemed to be failing. At that moment, the entire ship shook violently, and the lights flickered. "Everyone hold on!" Elias shouted over the intercom. The jolt lasted only a few seconds, but it was enough to disorient everyone. When the lights stabilized, Elias ran to the lab. "What happened?" he asked, finding Mira and Axiom 7 on the ground. "The element reacted," Mira said, standing up. "I don't know how, but it seems to have activated something." "Activated what?" "I don't know, but it's not good." Meanwhile, in her cabin, Zara stood in front of the screen, which now showed a clear image of the blurry figure she had seen earlier. It was a creature, but not like the Devourers. This one was different, more human, but with an aura of power that made it seem almost divine. "Who are you?" Zara asked, not waiting for an answer. But the figure spoke. "I am the Watcher," he said, his voice echoing in Zara's mind. "And you have awakened something that should have remained dormant." The crew gathered in the cockpit, where Zara showed them the image of the Watcher. They were all in shock, but knew they couldn't ignore what was happening. "What does he want?" Lyra asked, looking at the picture. "I don't know," Zara replied. "But he doesn't seem hostile. At least, not yet." "We need to find out more," Elias said. "Axiom, can you try to make contact?" "I'll try," the android replied, connecting to the ship's systems. While Axiom 7 worked, Torin checked the power readings. "The fluctuations are increasing. If we don't do something soon, we could be in serious trouble." "What do you suggest?" Elias asked. "We could try to redirect the power, but I don't know if that would work." "Do it. We have no other choice." While Torin worked to redirect the power, Axiom 7 managed to establish a connection with the Watcher. "Who are you?" Elias asked, addressing the figure on the screen. "I am the Watcher," the figure repeated. "And you have awakened something you should not have touched." "What are you talking about?" The portal they closed was just a part of something bigger. Something they can't even understand. "So what should we do?" "You must prepare yourself. Because what is coming is not something you can face alone." Before Elias could respond, the connection was cut, and the screen returned to normal. "What the hell just happened?" Lyra asked, looking at Elias. "I don't know," he replied. "But whatever it is, we can't ignore it." The Horizon arrived on Earth, but their return was not what they expected. Instead of being welcomed as heroes, they were placed in quarantine. The authorities did not understand what had happened on the planet Erythra, and until they did, the crew could not return to normal. "This is ridiculous," Torin said, sitting in a waiting room. "We save the universe, and this is what we get." "It's not personal," Elias said. "They're just being cautious." "Careful, my ass," Lyra muttered. Meanwhile, Mira and Axiom 7 continued to analyze the samples. Although they were under surveillance, no one could stop them from working. "There's something else," Mira said, looking at the readings. "Something we hadn't noticed before." "What is it?" Axiom 7 asked. "It's as if the element were alive." "Alive?" "Yes. And it seems to be communicating with something." "With what?" "I don't know. But I don't think it's from this universe." At that moment, Elias entered the room. "We need to talk." "What's wrong?" Mira asked. "The authorities have decided that we cannot keep the samples. They're going to confiscate them." "What? You can't do that." "I'm sorry, but we have no choice." Mira looked at Axiom 7, then at Elias. "So what do we do?" "We're getting ready," Elias said. "Because whatever comes next, we're not going to sit back and do nothing." The confiscation of the samples was a hard blow for the crew of the Horizon. Although they understood the authorities' reasons, they knew they were missing a unique opportunity to understand what they had found on the planet Erythra. "We can't let them take everything," Mira said, watching the government scientists pack up the samples. "There's something in that element that could change everything." "I know," Elias replied, his voice calm but firm. "But for now, we must play by their rules." "What if they're not ready for what they have?" Lyra asked, crossing her arms. "That's their problem," Elias said. "Our priority is to make sure we're ready for what's coming." Meanwhile, at a secret government facility, samples began to be analyzed. Scientists were fascinated by the properties of the unknown element, but also concerned about its instability. "This is incredible," said one of the scientists, looking at the readings. "But also dangerous. Do you think it could be used as a weapon?" Another asked. "I don't know, but we can't underestimate him." Elsewhere in the facility, a group of high-ranking officers were discussing the situation. "What do we do with the crew of the Horizon?" one of them asked. "We're keeping an eye on them," another replied. "They know too much, and we can't risk them talking. What if they try to do something? Then we stop them." Meanwhile, Elias and his team were constantly monitored. They knew they could not trust the authorities, but they also knew they could not act openly. "We have to find a way to recover the samples," Mira said quietly as they walked through the halls of the facility. "It won't be easy," Elias replied, "but it won't be impossible." "Do you have a plan?" "Not yet, but I will have it." Night fell on the facility, and the crew of the Horizon gathered secretly in one of the warehouses. They knew they could trust no one but themselves. "We have to act quickly," Elias said, looking at each of them. "If we don't, we could lose everything we've gained." "What do you suggest?" Torin asked. "We need to distract the guards and access the laboratory where the samples are." "And how do we do that?" "Lyra and Zara will create a diversion at the other end of the facility. Torin and I will take care of retrieving the samples. Mira and Axiom 7 will cover us from here." "What if they catch us?" Zara asked. "Then we'll have to improvise," Elias replied. "But we can't just sit back and do nothing." The plan was put into motion. Lyra and Zara caused a short circuit in one of the power systems, causing alarms to sound at the other end of the facility. While the guards ran to investigate, Elias and Torin headed to the lab. "Stay alert," Elias said, opening the door with a device Axiom 7 had provided them. Inside the lab, the samples were kept in a special container. Torin quickly opened it and began taking out the samples. "We have to hurry," Elias said, looking toward the door. "We're almost done," Torin replied, placing the last of the samples into a backpack. At that moment, the door opened and a group of guards entered the laboratory. "Stop!" one of them shouted, pointing his weapons at Elias and Torin. "We have no choice," Elias said, pulling a small device out of his pocket. "What is that?" Torin asked, looking at the device. "A gift from Axiom," Elias replied, activating it. The device emitted an energy wave that rendered the guards unconscious. "Come on," Elias said, running toward the door. Torin followed her, and together they managed to leave the facility undetected. Back on the horizon, the crew gathered to discuss their next move. They knew they couldn't stay on Earth, but they couldn't leave without a plan either. "What do we do now?" Lyra asked, looking at Elias. "We have to go," he replied. "But we can't do it without a destination. What if we go back to the planet Erythra?" Mira suggested. Because there's something there that we don't understand. Something that could be the key to all of this. "It's not a bad idea," Torin said, "but it will be dangerous." "Everything we've done has been dangerous," Elias replied. "But we have no other choice." As they prepared the ship for takeoff, Axiom 7 approached Elias. "Captain, there is something you should know," the android said. "What's wrong, Axiom?" "I've been analyzing the samples, and something doesn't fit." "What is it?" "The element seems to be changing." "Changing how?" "I don't know, but it's not stable." Elias frowned. "Then we have to hurry." The Horizonte took off secretly, avoiding the authorities' radar. They knew they were committing an act of rebellion, but they also knew it was necessary. Heading for the planet Erythra, Elias said, adjusting the controls. "Here we go," Lyra murmured, looking up at the stars. The return trip to the planet Erythra was quicker than expected, thanks to the improvements Torin had made to the warp engines. But as they got closer, the tension on board increased. "Power readings are increasing," Axiom 7 said, watching the screens. "Is this the portal?" Elias asked. "I don't know, but something is happening." When they arrived at the planet, they were in for a surprise. The obelisk they had seen earlier was active again, and a pulsating light emanated from its base. "What's going on?" Zara asked, looking up at the surface. "I don't know," Elias replied. "But we'll find out." The exploration team descended in the shuttle, preparing for whatever they might find. They knew they could make no mistakes, but they also knew they had no other choice. "Stay together," Elias said, leading the group toward the obelisk. When they arrived, they were met with a scene that left them speechless. The obelisk was surrounded by humanoid figures, but they were not like the Devourers. These creatures seemed to be made of light, and their movements were fluid and harmonious. "Who are they?" Lyra asked, looking at Elias. "I don't know," he replied, "but they don't seem hostile." One of the figures approached them, and a voice echoed in their minds. "They've returned," the figure said. "We knew they would." "Who are you?" Elias asked. "We are the creators," the figure replied, "and you have awakened something you should not have touched." The revelation of the creators left the crew of the Horizon in shock. These creatures of light claimed to be responsible for the creation of the portal and the unknown element. "Why do they do this?" Elias asked, trying to remain calm. "To protect the balance," one of the figures replied. "But something has gone wrong." "What went wrong?" "The element they found should never have been discovered. It is an essential part of the fabric of the universe, and tampering with it could have catastrophic consequences. So what should we do?" "They must help us restore balance. But it will be dangerous." "We have no other choice," Elias said, looking at his crew. "Are you ready?" They all nodded, knowing they couldn't back down. "Then let us begin," said the figure of light, guiding them towards the obelisk. The creators explained that the unknown element was a form of pure energy, capable of altering reality itself. But its manipulation had triggered a chain reaction that threatened to destroy the balance of the universe. "We must close the portal permanently," one of the figures said. "But to do so, we need your help." "What should we do?" Elias asked. "You must enter the portal and find the primordial core. Only there will you be able to stop the chain reaction. What if we don't? Then the universe as you know it will cease to exist." The crew knew they had no other choice. With determination, they prepared to enter the portal. "Stay together," Elias said, looking at each of them. "We don't know what's on the other side." "Here we go," Lyra murmured, following Elias toward the portal. The portal's interior was a labyrinth of light and energy. The crew moved carefully, following the creator's directions. "How much longer?" Zara asked, looking around. "I don't know," Elias replied. "But we must move on." Suddenly, they found themselves in front of a gigantic door, made of a material that seemed alive. "This is the primordial core," a voice said in their minds. "You must enter." Elias pushed open the door, and they found themselves in a chamber filled with pure energy. At the center was a gigantic crystal, pulsating with an intense glow. "That's it," Elias said, approaching. "We need to deactivate it." "How?" Torin asked. "I don't know, but we have to try." As they worked, a dark figure appeared in the chamber. It was a devourer, but larger and more powerful than any they had seen. "Careful," Lyra shouted, aiming her gun. The devourer lunged at them. But Elias managed to activate a device that Axiom 7 had given them. The device emitted a wave of energy that repelled the devourer, but did not stop it completely. "Hurry," Elias shouted, working on a glass. With a last-ditch effort, they managed to deactivate the primordial core. The portal began to collapse, and the crew ran for the exit. The collapse of the portal took them back to the planet Erythra, where the creators were waiting for them. "They have done it," said one of the figures. "They have restored the balance." "And now what?" Elias asked. "Now, you must return to your world. But remember, the universe is a vast place full of mysteries. Not all of them are meant to be discovered." The crew nodded, knowing they had learned a valuable lesson. "Thank you," Elias said, looking at the creators. "We will not forget you." "Neither do we to you," the figure replied, fading into the light. The return to Earth was smooth, but the crew knew their lives would never be the same. They had touched something bigger than themselves, and it had changed them forever. "What do we do now?" Lyra asked, looking up at the stars. "We continue exploring," Elias replied, "but with more caution. What if we find something like this again? Then we will face it together." As the horizon entered Earth's atmosphere, the crew prepared for what was to come. They knew the universe was full of dangers, but also wonders. The crew of the Horizonte were greeted as heroes, but also as enigmas. The authorities did not fully understand what they had experienced, but they knew they were important. "Thank you for your service," said a high-ranking officer, shaking Elias's hand. "We just did what we had to do," he replied with a smile. Meanwhile, Mira and Axiom 7 continued to analyze the samples they had recovered. Although the primordial core had been deactivated, they knew there was much more to discover. "This isn't the end," Mira said, looking up at the stars. "It's just the beginning." Elias joined them, looking out into the horizon. He knew that the universe was a vast place, full of mysteries, but also possibilities. "Here we go," he murmured, feeling the wind on his face. Thank you for joining us on this incredible adventure. If you like this story, don't forget to give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and leave us a comment. Until next time, explorers.